In ancient Rome, a scandal was about to unfold. And no, it wasn't your typical teenager sneaking a kiss in the moonlight. It was an elite senator and a member of Rome's infamous orgies. We're talking about Marcus Junius Brutus, one of the men who plotted to assassinate Julius Caesar. But hold on before you shake your head in disapproval. Things in ancient Rome were a bit different. In fact, they were a lot different. The so-called Roman orgies weren't just wild parties. They were a strategic display of power, control, and sometimes a bit of desperation. Welcome to my channel. And today let's unravel the threads of these decadent Roman nights. You see, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither were these parties. The Roman orgy had deep roots, stretching back to Greece. Remember the infamous symposium hosted by the rich and powerful? Well, the Romans took that idea and added their own twist. Picture this, a group of elite Roman men, their faces flushed with wine, engaging in cavalier, a drinking game involving black and red dice. They toss these dice and chant, "Let us make merry, cast away care." This is more than just a party. It's a social hierarchy, a display of masculinity, and a hefty dose of strategy. After all, these men aren't just drinking, they're also gambling with their reputation and status. The stakes are high, and the night is young. But let's shift our gaze to the women in these gatherings. Remember, for Roman women, sexuality was a powerful weapon, a way to gain and maintain influence. These pleasure parties were their battleground. Take, for instance, the scandalous tale of Julia Maesa. This woman wasn't content with just throwing parties. She was determined to make history. Yet her grand plans didn't involve politics or conquest. Instead, Julia Maesa hosted lavish parties with a twist. She would invite 8 men of only one type, bald, short, fat, thin, old, or ugly. And then she'd place bets, guessing which one would seduce the most women by the end of the night. Talk about turning the tables. Now, imagine the scene. 8 men, each trying to outdo the others, vying for the attention of Julia Maesa's guests. These weren't your typical dinner party chumps. These men were competing for the highest honor, the chance to be seen, to be noticed by the elite. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good competition? But hold on, because things are about to get crazier. Enter Domitian, the emperor who loved nothing more than being the center of attention. His pleasure parties weren't just about revelry and debauchery. They were a display of his power, a way to assert his dominance, and maybe a desperate attempt to secure his legacy. You see, Domitian wasn't just throwing parties for fun. He wanted to create an experience, a spectacle that would leave his guests in awe and solidify his reputation as a ruler. And what better way to do that than by inviting 8 men of different temperaments, bald, short, fat, thin, old, or ugly, and letting them loose in a room full of eager women? It's a bizarre mix of social experiment, popularity contest, and psychological game. So why the secrecy? Why the need for masks and anonymity? In a world where reputation was everything and scandal could destroy your career, these parties offered a safe haven, or so they thought. Behind the masks, the men shed their identities, becoming anonymous players in a game of desire and conquest. It was a chance to escape the scrutiny of society and indulge in pleasures that would be frowned upon in the daylight. The allure of the unknown, the thrill of the chase, and the promise of anonymity drew men into these parties, promising a night of pure, unadulterated indulgence. And then there were the orgies, a wild mix of pagan rituals, religious ceremonies, and erotic abandon. Picture this, a group of men and women gathered in a dimly lit room, their faces illuminated only by the flickering flames of torches. They're not just partying. They're engaging in a ritual, a strange mix of paganism, religion, and erotic celebration. These orgies weren't your average pleasure parties. They were a blend of the divine and the carnal, where the lines between devotion and desire were blurred. The participants weren't just looking for earthly pleasures. They were seeking a connection with the gods, or maybe they were just really into goat sacrifices. But here's the irony. These orgies, with their strange mix of the sacred and the sexual, were often condemned by the very society that indulged in them. The Romans knew the power of perception. They understood that how you're seen in public can make or break your career. And in a city as gossipy and judgmental as Rome, discretion was golden. So while they reveled in the darkness of these orgies, they did so under the cover of secrecy, ensuring that the scandalous details remained hidden from the prying eyes of their peers. But as we all know, the walls have ears and the whispers spread, so what happens next? What are the consequences of these scandalous nights? Did the gods turn a blind eye to their worshippers' earthly pleasures, or did they strike back with thunderous wrath? Join me next time as we delve into the fallout of these pleasure-filled evenings. We'll explore the repercussions, the scandals, and the taboos that surrounded these orgies and find out how the Romans navigated the precarious balance between divine worship and earthly desires. If you thought Roman evening banquets were just about food and wine, think again. In the wealthiest Roman households, these gatherings often included rituals that blurred the line between religion and entertainment. Let's talk about the Bacchanalia. If you've been with us for a while, you already know this. But just in case you're new around here, let's do a quick recap. The Bacchanalia was a Roman festival in honor of Bacchus, the Roman god of wine and ecstasy. It began as a small ceremony with wine offerings in the Greek colony of Athens in the 5th century BCE. But by the 3rd century BCE, it had evolved into a week-long festival complete with processions, theatrical performances, and yes, lots and lots of wine. The revelry was led by female worshippers called Bacchae, who roamed the streets in large groups, chanting hymns to Bacchus and dancing to the sound of drums and flutes. Sometimes they went house to house, demanding wine from their neighbors, and sometimes they held all-night parties deep in the woods. As you can imagine, this level of enthusiasm did not always sit well with the respectable citizens of Rome by 186 BCE. The Bacchanalia had become so wild that the Roman Senate passed laws to restrict it. According to the historian Livy, young men were seen dancing with women in taverns, and prostitutes openly practiced their trade. There were even rumors of human sacrifice. So, in 186 BCE, the Senate passed laws outlawing the celebrations. But the Romans' love of wine and theater was not so easily extinguished. In Part 1, we saw how parts of the Bacchanalia survived the official ban, showing up in private homes and taverns throughout the city. What happened next? Well, as the centuries passed, the Bacchanalia became an integral part of Roman culture, popping up everywhere from dinner parties to poetry readings. But no one took Roman appropriation to a greater extreme than the emperors. Caligula hosted feasts inviting 8 men of only one type, bald, short, or fat. Nero welcomed 8 men of another type, bald, short, or fat. Each guest arrived wearing a mask and was assigned a new name. After shedding their identities at the door, the men participated in theatrical games and were given prizes by Nero. It was all a very silly game. But as the historian Suetonius tells it, the emperor took great pleasure in humiliating his guests, often forcing them to fight, dance, or dress like women. It was a far cry from the original Bacchanalia, if you can even call it that. But what about the point of all this role-playing? What was it for? Well, for the Romans, it was a chance to shed their identities and experience something new, if only for a night. A senator could become a shepherd. A noblewoman might play the role of a goddess. Those roles could reverse. But again, it was only temporary. It was all part of the fantasy, freedom under structure, chaos with boundaries. You see, even though the Romans loved the feeling of abandon they experienced during the Bacchanalia, they did not actually want to abandon society's rules. That's why they kept the rituals in private homes. And that's why the host had ultimate authority over the festivities. In fact, even in the wildest, most chaotic moments, there was still a hierarchy. Guests could be instructed to stand in particular formations or wear certain costumes. Entertainers were often told exactly what to say, how to move, and when to appear. Musicians were expected to play soft tunes in the background while wine was poured in patterns copied from ancient rites. Some evenings even included reenactments of Roman myths, not as stage plays but as immersive experiences. At the end of the night, after the final hymn and the last mask was removed, everything returned to normal. The senator went back to being a senator. The noblewoman went back to being a noblewoman, and the actor went back to being an actor. Of course, not everyone enjoyed these evenings. Some were invited out of obligation. Others were required to attend as part of their service. and not everyone wore a mask by choice. Still, for Rome's elite, these gatherings were more than distractions. They were about power, symbolism, and identity. They gave people a chance to play, but never forget their place. In Part 3, we'll dive deeper into how these gatherings became political weapons, how influence, alliances, and even rivalries were shaped behind closed doors. See you next time. Our exploration into the hidden world of ancient Roman entertainment continues. So far, we've seen how elite Roman gatherings combined luxury, ritual, and mystery. But now we get to something even more Roman than marble statues and wine-soaked banquets: politics. In ancient Rome, even private evening banquets were not just about indulgence, they were about power. These events became tools of influence, alliances, manipulation, and sometimes silent war. Think of a typical Roman villa. You've got the sprawling rooms, the exquisite artwork, maybe even a secret passage or two. Now imagine that setting filled with flickering candlelight, the murmur of conversations, and the clink of glasses. The stage is set for a night of revelry and intrigue. Let us start with a question. Why would a senator invite his rivals to a private feast in his villa? Not just to impress. Not just to show off his imported ivory couches and golden dinnerware. No, it was to send a message. Look how powerful I am. I control the entertainment. I control the room. And tonight I'm watching you. Guests were chosen carefully. Alliances could be built or broken in one evening. A quiet conversation near the fountain. That could be a new military partnership, a glance exchanged across a room. That might hint at betrayal or ambition, and then came the favor economy. In Rome, personal favors were everything. You helped someone's son become a junior magistrate? Great, now they owe you. You invited a rising general to your exclusive villa gathering? Excellent, now you expect loyalty. Even the seating arrangements mattered. If you were seated next to the host, you were important. If you were placed near the musicians or the hallway, well, you weren't, but it wasn't just men playing this game. Some elite Roman women were masters of social strategy. They understood how influence worked, not just through public speeches or battlefield victories, but through relationships, conversations, and subtle hints dropped over shared goblets of wine. Wives of senators and emperors, like Livia Drusilla or Plotina, were often deeply involved in behind-the-scenes political games. And yes, some used gatherings to quietly gather information, make alliances, or embarrass rivals. And let's not forget, secrets were currency in Rome. These villa gatherings, full of candlelight and whispers, often served as opportunities to observe, overhear, and sometimes even trap. A careless comment could be remembered and used later. A private moment could become public if the timing was right. In short, these parties weren't just entertainment. They were a stage, and everyone knew it. Those who played well could rise. Those who slipped often fell fast. So now you're part of the elite. You've got your villa, your toga collection, and your network of influential friends. You're ready to throw the party of the century. Your guests arrive, each one more important than the last. You exchange greetings, maybe a kiss on the cheek for your female guests. The men, they go through a ritual of their own. A handshake, a pat on the back, a subtle display of dominance or camaraderie. Women in Rome often had the freedom to choose their own partners, but their choices were still influenced by the desire for advantageous matches. Love wasn't always the primary consideration. Marriages were strategic, forging alliances between families. Once the introductions are done, it's time for the tour. Your guests will want to see everything you've got. From the mosaics on the floor to the frescoes on the walls, each detail showcasing your impeccable taste and wealth. And don't forget the furniture, those intricately carved chairs and couches, each piece a work of art. And then there's the food. Oh, the food. You've got the finest ingredients, imported wines, exotic delicacies. It's a feast fit for, well, the emperor. Wait, is that an insult? Did you use the wrong type of olive oil? In Rome, the quality of food was crucial. It wasn't just about quantity, it was about the presentation, the flavors, the ingredients. Remember, your guests are discerning. They know what good food tastes like, and you, my friend, need to deliver. As the evening deepens, so does the conversation. This isn't just a social call, no. This is a chance to network, to schmooze, to make deals. Every word is carefully chosen, every smile has a hidden meaning. And you're at the center of it all, orchestrating this symphony of status, power, and prestige. But wait, there's more. The villa isn't just a place of business. It's also a place of pleasure. Music fills the air, maybe a prostitute or two makes an appearance. This is Rome. After all, life is short, the parties are long, and the wine flows freely. So pour me a glass, my friend, and let's raise a toast to villa life in ancient Rome, where politics and partying collide, where every detail is a statement, and where the night is always filled with intrigue. Until next time, remember, in Rome, you either play the game or you pay the price. And in this game, the stakes are high, the competition is fierce, and the rules are made to be broken. Just ask Caligula. In Part 4, we'll explore how art, architecture, and even furniture inside these villas help set the mood, and how every detail was designed to reinforce status, taste, and subtle control. Thanks for watching. Imagine walking into a house party and immediately feeling like you've stepped into another world. Well, in ancient Rome, this wasn't a party trick, it was everyday life. Roman elite gatherings weren't just about luxury or indulgence. They were about strategy, performance, and illusion. And what better way to shape an illusion than through architecture? In Part 3, we saw how these parties were invitations into the private lives of the elite. Only a few carefully chosen guests were allowed inside, which is why our invitation to a dinner party at the home of the Roman Emperor Caligula contained a warning: do not bring an escort. This was a night for networking, not socializing. But once inside, there was more going on than met the eye. Roman villas weren't just homes, they were stages. Every column, cushion, and ceiling was chosen with a purpose. And behind those grand marble doors, things were carefully crafted to impress, control, and even manipulate. Let's start with the layout. Guests didn't just walk in casually. Villas were designed so visitors would pass through a series of rooms, each more impressive than the last. You'd start in the atrium with its fountains and family statues, then move through corridors lined with art before arriving at the courtyard with its exotic plants and imported tiles. By the time you reached the final gathering room, the triclinium or dining hall, you were already awed. These dining rooms were where much of the evening took place. They were arranged with 3 reclining couches around a low table, hence the name triclinium. The host controlled the center. Everyone else was arranged by status. But here's where it gets deeper. The walls of these rooms often featured frescoes, paintings of myths, legends, or romantic gods like Venus and Bacchus. Some showed feasts, others showed music and dance. Some hinted, very subtly, at scenes of pursuit or flirtation. These weren't random decorations. They were meant to set the mood, to influence what people felt and imagined, even if no one said it out loud. Some villas even had special rooms, smaller, more intimate spaces with softer lighting, curved walls and ceilings painted like the sky. These were designed to make you feel like you had left reality. You weren't in Rome anymore. You were in a dream, or maybe a myth. And let's not forget the sound design. Marble floors echoed footsteps. Indoor fountains provided background noise to hide private conversations. Musicians played in hidden corners, filling the room with soft melodies that seemed to come from nowhere. Even smell was part of the performance. Servants burned incense or scattered flower petals soaked in oils. The scent wasn't just pleasant, it was symbolic. Different smells were associated with different gods, emotions, or places. Altogether, the effect was overwhelming. These villas were meant to control the senses, to guide behavior without anyone noticing. You didn't just attend a Roman gathering, you were absorbed into it. The next part will explore what happened after these gatherings ended. How rumors spread, reputations were made or destroyed, and how some hosts paid a very heavy price for entertaining too boldly. If you're enjoying this series, you might be interested to know that the way we design our spaces today is still heavily influenced by ancient Rome. For example, the idea of the open floor plan, popular in modern homes, was actually an innovation introduced by Roman architects. They realized that by removing interior walls, You could create a sense of openness and allow for more natural light to enter a space. This was a radical idea at the time and was initially adopted by wealthy Romans for their grand villas. However, over time, this design concept trickled down to middle-class homes. Today, it's a staple of contemporary architecture. In addition to the open floor plan, Roman innovations in heating and cooling systems are also worth noting. They developed systems of underfloor heating using heated air or hot water circulated through a network of pipes. This allowed for precise temperature regulation within rooms, a luxury not commonly enjoyed today. Additionally, Romans built atriums with glass or plastic coverings to create conservatories where plants could thrive year-round. Lastly, Romans were masters of integrating indoor and outdoor spaces. They used columns and arches to create expansive terraces and gardens that blurred the boundaries between inside and outside. These design elements continue to feature prominently in modern homes and public buildings. This isn't just a coincidence. It's evidence of the enduring legacy of Roman architecture. Their innovations and design sensibilities continue to shape the way we build and inhabit spaces today. Thanks for watching. The lamps have burned low. The musicians have packed up. The marble floors are scattered with petals and crumbs. The guests have gone home, but the party isn't over. Not in Rome, because in a society built on image, status, and public opinion, what happened after the gathering often mattered more than what happened during it. Let's talk about gossip. Rome's favorite sport? The elite in ancient Rome didn't have Instagram stories or tabloids, but they had something better: poets and historians. Writers like Juvenal, Suetonius, and Tacitus loved nothing more than to turn whispers into pages of scathing satire or political attack. If a banquet was too extravagant, if a guest behaved oddly, if someone was invited or not invited, it could all become part of a rumor mill that never stopped spinning, and sometimes the hosts paid the price. Take Emperor Nero, for example. Stories circulated that his palace gatherings were so excessive, they embarrassed the Senate. Whether or not they were true didn't matter. The rumors helped paint him as a tyrant. Or Emperor Elagabalus, known for his dramatic tastes and strange nightly events. His dinners became legends not for their food, but for the whispers they left behind. Eventually his reputation helped bring about his downfall. But even lesser nobles weren't safe. A wealthy host who flaunted too much power through his gatherings could find himself targeted politically. Perhaps someone in attendance reported something. Perhaps a rival used the event as evidence of moral decay. One wrong word, one uninvited guest, one misinterpreted joke, and the entire evening could turn into a scandal. It didn't even take real events, just the appearance of them. In Rome, image was everything, and people didn't need proof to believe a good story. Even ordinary citizens enjoyed the show. They might never see inside a patrician villa, but they'd hear the stories passed down through market gossip or street poems. The elite lived in a world where privacy was an illusion and reputation was as fragile as a goblet of imported glass. So why risk it? Because for many Roman elites, hosting bold events wasn't just dangerous, it was a flex. It said, I have money, I have protection, I can do what others only whisper about. But that worked only as long as their power lasted. In Part 6, we'll conclude this journey by asking what it all really meant. Were these gatherings simply elite distractions? Or were they symbols of something deeper, the strange, shifting soul of Rome itself? If you're enjoying this series, please consider supporting us. Your support helps us keep this content free for everyone. You'll get access to exclusive content and early access to ad-free videos. Now let's return to the party. The house has fallen silent except for the servants clearing the tables. Outside, the evening is ending, but inside there are still voices. Not of revelers, but of senators and diplomats, men whose lives have been shaped by the Republic and are now reshaping the empire. Talk turns to banquets and brothels, to artists and athletes, gladiators and prostitutes. They've come to unwind, to shed the weight of Rome and be, if only for a night, ordinary men, ordinary. How strange that word sounds in this place. Here, amidst the art and luxury, surrounded by the ghosts of emperors and heroes, these men seek an escape from the very society that made them. For what is a Roman senator but a relic of the past, a man living in the shadow of kings and emperors, What is a Roman knight but a soldier without a war? The Republic is dead, but its values live on in these men, keeping them bound to ideals that no longer serve a purpose. And then there's Marcus, a poet turned senator, a man who bridges the old and the new, the Republic and the Empire. He's here tonight to remind them of what they once were, to inspire them to be more than what they've become. As he speaks, the room grows quiet. All eyes are on him. This is his moment. Now he must decide how to shape their future. Will he urge them towards decadence or responsibility? Will he remind them of their glory days or push them towards change? The fate of Rome may depend on the words he chooses. But for now, the night is young, and so are the hopes for Rome's future. The feast goes on, and with it, the gamble of empire. Thank you for watching. The Gamble of Empire is a tale of ancient Rome, a narrative experience set in the late Roman Republic, where you make decisions that affect the fate of the city. Our game lets you explore what it means to be Roman, whether you'd rather be a powerful senator, a cunning merchant, or a ruthless gangster, the choice is yours. Play on PC, Mac, or Linux? No, this isn't a basic text adventure. Our game features an original score, full-color artwork, and multiple storylines. We won't tell you what to do. You'll need to think like a Roman, build alliances, manage your resources, and make choices that will have consequences. Choose wisely, because in Rome, every decision counts. Now that we've walked through marble villas, heard whispers of rituals, witnessed power plays, and seen reputations rise and fall, let us pause and ask the real question: why did these gatherings happen at all? What made Rome one of the most disciplined and structured civilizations in history, also the home of such extravagance behind closed doors? The answer, like most things Roman, is layered. At first glance, these events seem like mere indulgence, the rich enjoying their wealth while the poor toiled. But dig deeper, and you find something more, an empire trying to escape itself. Rome was obsessed with control, law, discipline, order. Every citizen knew their place, every stone road led somewhere. Every military march was timed to perfection. But beneath all that structure was a world of anxiety, wars, betrayals, plagues, political shifts, and personal ambition. For the elite, these gatherings became pressure valves, moments to play, to pretend, to act out myth and fantasy in a world that otherwise demanded rigid self-control. They were also symbols of status. To host such an event meant you had wealth, influence, connections, and, just as important, that you could survive the consequences. In a way, these parties were political theater dressed up as leisure, but there's something else too. Rome had an uneasy relationship with its own power. The further the empire expanded, the more it struggled to define who it was. Old values from the Republic, frugality, simplicity, duty, clashed with the new realities of empire, luxury, spectacle, and ambition. These private evenings mirrored that conflict. They were micro-Romes, little empires of silk, marble, music, and performance, where guests played roles and hosts ruled for a night. And like Rome itself, they often collapsed under the weight of their own drama. So were the stories exaggerated? Absolutely. Ancient writers had agendas. They used scandal like paintbrushes, coloring history with rumor and satire. But that doesn't mean nothing happened. It just means we'll never know exactly how much is true. Still, the fact that these stories survived, whispered, written, retold, shows us something important. Even in a world of emperors, soldiers, and law codes, human beings craved escape, performance, and moments of freedom. Even if those moments were carefully staged, dimly lit, and followed by scandal. The truth is, even the mightiest civilizations have their secrets. And behind closed doors, even emperors crave a little escapism. Maybe that's why the stories of Rome's most infamous parties have endured, whispering across the centuries, reminding us that beneath the marble and mosaics, there beat hearts that yearned for a night of unrestrained revelry. And now, those ancient lamps have long gone out, the villas have crumbled, the masks have fallen. But the stories remain, quietly reminding us that even the most powerful civilizations had their shadows. You've reached the end of our story. Sleep well, knowing that even the Romans needed a break from Rome sometimes. And maybe, just maybe, behind every grand empire there's a velvet curtain waiting to be pulled back, This has been a Vox Media production. Thanks for watching.